Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm your co-host, Mike Brazier, and joining me here in studio is my co-host, Chris Jennings. Chris, how are you?
Excellent.
And today we have a really special episode, probably what will end up being one of our favorite. We have a very special guest in studio with us, a bona fide celebrity in the outdoor world, among the outdoor community, and really even beyond. Our guest today is America's most recognizable angler, Bill Dance. Bill,
thank you, Mike.
Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chris.
And before we kind of get into some of the questions that we have for you today, I'll take a moment to say thank you for what all you've done for the outdoor community, the angling community. Like I'm sure, like Chris, like so many other people across the country, you were a part of our childhood or our adulthood even. We had somebody recognize you in your signature Tennessee hat just in the hallway a moment ago and came and had introduced themselves to you. And thank you for being part of their lives. And I'm sure you get that a lot. But I just wanted to say, thank you for everything that you've done. We'll talk about how you continue to serve the angling and outdoor community as we get into our questions. But one story that I'll share with you here is I was at the Bass Pro World's Fishing Fair a couple of weeks ago. I know you were there as well. I came downstairs in my hotel room the first day and I look over into the breakfast area, and I recognize you with your signature Tennessee hat. I didn't come over and interrupt you. You were having breakfast with some folks there. But the first thing that I did whenever I went outside was sent a text to a lot of my buddies and said, hey, guess who's here? There was Bill Dance. And so it was just cool to be able to share that, and it brought back so many memories of my childhood watching you on TV. So my personal thanks. I'm sure Chris has many stories of his
absolutely.
as well.
No, it was funny. Last night I was grilling dinner for my family, and I was talking to my mom on the phone, and I grew up in Indiana and very outdoorsy. My parents they gave us, a lot of flexibility, and their only question was, hey, if you're going to leave the house or go anywhere on your bike, go fishing, you just have to write us a note. So I'm like 10, 11 years old. And she even said she wasn't really sure how old I was, but I would write a note and be like, Mom, riding the bike over here, going fishing. And she said I would sign all of my notes, Bill Dance. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. My mom just reminded me of that last night. She's like, honestly, I think I can find those notes that you wrote it out. Like, Mom, going over, to Williams to ride bikes, Bill Dance. So that's pretty special.
So the original author of the song, Bill Dance, and I only want to be like Bill Dance.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a lot of us in this generation that grew up, really, who were really in the outdoors, and you probably were a pivotal, monumental moment for a person, for all of outdoorsmen now, because we grew up, watching you do this and really, like the employee in the hallway that just walked past and was like, oh, that's Bill Dance. He had to stop and shake your hand. And he even said, I still kiss my fish, and so it's things like that just makes this, just such a cool moment for me and Mike, obviously. So
do you ever get tired of hearing those stories, about hearing people thank you and hearing the stories of what you meant to them in their childhood?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I love to hear them. I really do. I can relate back to those. I think we all have people that we look up to, and I know I do. And to hear stories about the past, I appreciate that. I really do. I hear it from writers. I hear it from just at a service station. I hear it in a restaurant. I hear it walks of life. And I appreciate that. I really do. I take the time to listen to them too.
It's almost as though you're reading some of our notes here that we have in terms of our questions, because you started to hit on the very first thing that we wanted to ask is who were the people that influenced you growing up in terms of your path to fishing, the outdoors? Who were those people in your life?
Well, I was blessed as a youngster growing up. I had a daddy and a granddaddy that gave me the greatest gift of all, and that was introducing me to this great sport that we call fishing. People ask me, did you ever do any hunting? Yes, I did a lot of hunting. I had certain types of things that I enjoyed hunting. I was an avid squirrel hunter. I used to love to squirrel hunt. Did you ever duck hunt? Yes, I was an avid duck hunter. But I spent a lot of time, more so the challenge. The challenge was in squirrel hunting. I loved to squirrel hunt, and with a rifle. And I started fishing with my grandfather. And my grandfather was a doctor. My daddy was a doctor. My granddaddy was a doctor. My great-granddaddy, for 5 generations back, were all doctors. And my granddaddy was taught me a little bit about techniques, but he taught me more about anatomy, fish anatomy, how fish see, how fish hear. And that helped me tremendously as I grew older. And I began to practice that as I fished. And I remember things that I would see, things that I would do, fish that I would catch, and I would relate that back to something that he told me. And I said, well, you know, that's something he said about sight. That's something he said about hearing. And I remember the very first bass I ever caught. And when I caught that fish, it changed my whole direction in life. It is a great story that I'll share with you a little bit later if you want to, because it takes a minute or so to tell. But that one fish, it did change my whole direction in life. But when I was catching that fish, the things about it pertain to anatomy, and those thoughts of what he had taught me were flashing through my mind as I was catching that fish. I was 7 years old when I caught my biggest bass, my biggest largemouth. But my grandfather, or my granddaddy, that's what I call him, granddaddy. I didn't call him grandfather, or I call him granddaddy. But he was my mentor. And I had a writer ask me not long ago, he said, if you could go to dinner tomorrow night with 3 people, who would they be? And I said, well, there's no question in my mind who they'd be. It would be my granddaddy. It would be the Pope, and it would be Billy Graham. Those 3 people that I'd look up to right now, and I would just love to go to dinner with all 3 of them, especially my granddaddy. And that one person was very, very special in my life. He took the time to take me fishing. My daddy was more of a hunter, skeet shooter. He fished, but nothing like my granddaddy. I spent a lot of time in Middle Tennessee with my grandfather, wading the creeks and moving water. And that's still today my favorite form of fishing, is moving water. But to answer the question, the one person, my mentor, was my granddaddy.
That's pretty cool. There's a number of aspects of that story that resonate with some of the things that we've talked about on previous episodes, where people hunt and they try to understand the ecology of the bird and understand habitat requirements and so forth. And it sounds like you were a pretty cerebral fisherman from a very early age, thinking about the anatomy of the fish. And I'm quite certain you applied that to help yourself be a bit more successful. Your reference to your granddaddy influencing you, I'm sure many people listening to this share that same story in one way or another. And my family would never let me live this down if I didn't share that while your granddaddy sounds like a bass fisherman, mine was a catfish fisherman, and his favorite bait was Catfish Charlie. Now, it worked great, but it always got caked up on the reels and on the handles, so we tell stories and laugh all the time about how, yeah, it's great to go fishing with him, but you'd have to mess with the Catfish Charlie. Were you a big Catfish Charlie fan?
Well, back then, I fished when the creek got muddy. I would fish with, my grandmother had a big hen yard, and they were country people over in Lynchburg, Tennessee. That's where I spent most of my time. And my grandmother she'd prepare chicken, and the entrails, that's what I used.
Okay.
And I'd use it for catfish bait. And when the creek got muddy, I would head for the creek, and it seemed like that was the best time to catch catfish in the creek. And when the creek was clear, I'd fish for smallmouth, or what we'd call black perch, was a rock bass.
Yeah.
But we came with a product for Bass Pro, a catfish bait. Was an organic type bait, similar to the product you mentioned, Catfish Charlie,
Yeah.
and which was an excellent bait. They sold a lot of that product. I never fished with that product, but I fished with similar type products. But back in those early days, it relates back to the early days. We didn't have Bass Pro Shops. We didn't have academies. We didn't have. The only place you could buy fishing tackle was hardware stores.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You bought your terminal tackle there, and they had a few fishing lures, and that's where I found my first fishing lure. That's where I caught my first fish on. But you didn't have those type prepared baits back in those days, so you had to go out and catch grasshoppers, or you had to go find weed worms, or you had to find catawba worms, or you had to use. Like my grandmother would clean a chicken, and she would save me the inside parts.
Yeah,
and
the good
that's
stuff.
That's what I'd use for catfish baits. But I did fish catfish. But my granddaddy, he was more of a bluegill and a shellcracker, red ear fisherman. And he'd fish worms and stuff.
Yeah.
But I fished for bass mostly on the creeks, wading the creeks.
And just hearing how, you talk about that, how there was very little, tackle in some of these old hardware stores, and now, do you ever walk into a Bass Pro and just look at those walls of lures that are all signed, Bill Dance, and just kind of be blown away by that?
I've got some of those old baits, and I remember where Johnny Mars, founder of Bass Pro, where he got several of those major collections. A friend of mine from South Haven, or Whitehaven, Clyde Harbin, had a tremendous collection of old baits. And I mentioned to Clyde one time, he wanted to get rid of his major collection. And I'm telling you, he had a collection. In fact, I gave Clyde several old baits years and years ago. And he was in our first bass club. And Clyde said, I'm fixing to get rid of some of these or sell them or do something. And I said, wait a minute, I know somebody that might want them. And it was Johnny Mars. And if you'll go to the first Bass Pro in Memphis, over on Macon, you'll see some of those lures. And Johnny gave Clyde Arthur Harbin credit from that collection. But he gave his collection to Bass Pro. Yeah. And Johnny's got, I've seen a lot of those old-timey baits. In fact, I'll do promotion meet and greets, and a lot of times people will come up to me and say, I want you to have this. Can you sign this lure, and I want you to have one. They'll have two of them, and they'll give me one. And
that's cool.
So I've got a lot of those old-timey baits. And surprisingly, today, fish will bite those baits. They don't. A 5-pound bass doesn't know about a bait that was made 30 years ago or discontinued. Let me tell you this story. There was a hardware store in Lynchburg, Tennessee, called Motlow Hardware, and I would go in there on the square, and my grandmother's granddaddy lived a stone's throw from the square, in a stone throw from Mulberry Creek. And I would go in there, and the guy that ran the store, his name was Tosh. Everybody called him Tosh. The guy that owned it was Connor Motlow. Connor Motlow owned the hardware store. His brother Hap owned the bank. Rager Motlow ran Jack Daniel's Distillery. Moore County, where Lynchburg was a dry county. But the Motlows, great people. I had met them all when I was a youngster. But Connor had the hardware store. And I would go in there, and Tosh, under a glass counter, had about a half a dozen lures. And there was one particular lure that caught my eye, sold for 75 cents. Today, that lure is still made and sells for around $6. And I'd look at it, and Tosh would take it out and put it on the counter. And can I touch it? And he'd take it out, and he'd hand it to me. And I'd look at it. He'd put it back in the counter. Well, one day, this had been going on for a couple of months. Every time I'd go, I spent many, many, many days with my grandparents. One day, grandmother said, your granddaddy's going lake fishing today, this afternoon. Small towns would close a half a day through the week. At dinner time, That was lunch, noon. We'd have dinner at noon, and we'd have supper in the evening. She said, after dinner today, he's going lake fishing, not going to the creek. I said, we're going lake fishing. She said, yeah. And I went, oh, my goodness. She said, what is it? And I said, oh, nothing. My grandmother could read my mind like that. And she reached in her apron, and she pulled out a handkerchief and had a couple of knots in it. She kept her change in that handkerchief. And she took 3 quarters out, and she gave them to me. And she said, get up to the square and get you that whatever you call that bait. And quicker than a minute could jump a dipper, I was up to the square, ran in. I told Tosh, I said, Tosh, I got 3 quarters. He reached in and he said, I've been hiding that bait. I knew one day you wanted it. And he handed it to me. And I threw those 3 quarters on the counter. And I was back at the house. And I had a little old metal rod, a little wine reel with braided line on it, and a little section of catgut, which we call monofilament today. And I tied that bait on. We jumped in the car. Grandmother threw her quilt in. She'd always sit on under a shade tree and crochet. Granddaddy would throw out 2 rods with a sinker on it with red worms on it, and he'd red ear fish. Well, I had this rod with this little lure on it, and that bait was called an arbogast jitterbug.
I was getting ready to ask if it was a jitterbug. I almost said that. That's funny.
It was a frog-colored jitterbug. Yeah. That bait is still made today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
34 years ago.
Wow.
When I had the bait, 34 years. I took that bait and I scooted down out on a point, Cumberland Springs Lake, halfway between Lynchburg and Tullahoma, Tennessee, a spring-fed lake. That day changed my whole direction in life. And I eased out through some yucca plants, bushes, and I looked, and to my right, I saw 2 fish swimming along, a bass about 2 pounds and one about 1 pound. And I turned, and I took this little metal rod, and I made quick, tried to make several false casts, and I fired that jitterbug out, and I made a pretty good cast. It landed about 20 feet from where I wanted it to go, but when it hit the water, both fish stopped instantly. And my first thought, what my granddaddy taught me about how fish hear, I said, the fish heard that bait. They heard that bait hit the water. And I went, if you remember, they had that big metal lip on it, and he went, blah, 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 it wobbled on the surface. I started reeling it, and both fish turned in the direction of the bait. And I said, they heard that bait. They can't see it. They heard it. Not at 20 feet. They can't hear it. They can't see it, but they can hear it. And they started moving in the direction of the sound. And I said, they're picking it up. The lateral line on their body is like that of a sounding board. And these are things my granddaddy taught me about anatomy. And I said, I stopped the bait, and they stopped. I started to move the bait, they started to move. I stopped, they stopped. I started, they started. And they kept getting closer to the bait. And I don't know if I could hear the bait or it was my heart going dum, 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 dum. And I was so excited at 7 years old. Here's this new bait, and here's these 2 fish, and witnessing this. It was just the biggest thrill of my life at that moment. And I kept moving it, and all these thoughts, Granddaddy said, always wade up the creek where the debris and the off-colored water, gravel, would float downstream. And he always said, never drink the water below a cattle crossing. Always remember that.
You always remember that.
Always remember that. Yeah. But these are little thoughts. Just all these things were flashing through my mind. So I started it again. By now, the fish were about 10 feet from the bait. And I started to move it a little faster, and they moved closer. He said the biggest fish is always the dominant one. And now they were about 6 feet of the bait, and I stopped it. I twitched it, and I could watch them flinch and get closer. And as I started the bait again, the 2-pounder just out of note just blasted the bait. And the pounder tried to go with it and tried to eat it too. They were both fighting for the bait. And I started reeling this little funky reel and little funky rod I had. which was state of the art.
Yeah.
And I started reeling it, and it was the most exciting thing. What I had just witnessed, a fish hitting a piece of plastic, a phony, a fake frog with a big piece of metal on it and 2 treble hooks. And I created life there, and here I am making this fish hit something so phony, creating life to this. Now I'm taking him out of his world and hopefully bringing him into my world. And this was just the most spectacular moment I'd ever experienced. And I'm living it right now, and I've got goosebumps on my arm experience because I relived this thing. I was 7 years old, and that's been 20 years ago. But I wish it was. But anyway, I'm reeling it, and I got him about 2/3 of the way to the bank, and I couldn't take it anymore. I just threw the rod down, and I grabbed the line, and I just well roped him right in.
Yeah.
And I got him, took the bait, and I ran like I ran like a rabbit, just through all these bushes, and I ran up to my granddaddy. He said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" My grandmother went. She almost stuck the crochet needle through her hand. She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Look what I caught! Look what I caught!" My granddaddy says, "My goodness, that's a big bass." And he said, "Let me have it." I said, "What are you going to do with it?" And I said, "Grandmother, wrap it up in that quilt and sit on it." She said, "No, no." And Granddaddy put it on his stringer. He said, "It'll be fine. It'll be fine. We'll take it home." We didn't have cell phones or point and shoot cameras, but we took it home, and they took a picture of it. I still have that picture to this day. And but that fish changed. You know, it's funny in life. It's funny how someone will say something to you or something you do in life that can change your whole direction in life. It's funny. It's something you see, something someone says, something that happens to you in the spur of the moment that can change your whole direction in life. That fish, that largemouth bass, changed my whole direction in life. I know, without question, I wouldn't be doing what Bill Dance would not be doing what he's doing today had it not been for that jitterbug going to Cumberland Springs Lake, having a granddaddy that took the time to take me fishing and catching that bass. I know I wouldn't be sitting here with you two right now, with Mike and Chris here at Ducks Unlimited. I would not be here today had it not been for that fish.
That's pretty awesome. I really thought that story was going to something. I had a similar experience where, wanted this lure. Finally, like, my dad got me this lure, and it was like a big jerk bait of some kind that I didn't have any business throwing at 8 years old. And I remember getting it out and going the first time, in a rowboat at one of our lakes in Indiana, and get out there and just chuck this thing and just stick it about 40 feet up in a tree. my dad's like, "Yep, learn that lesson." That's why, for some reason, I thought that's the direction your story was going to go, but yours was even way better than mine. So,
but that was probably a pivotal moment.
That was
for you
also
too,
a pivotal moment for me. It's like, I got to learn how to cast if I'm going to throw this lure.
Well, I tell you what, those are just things that happen in your life that can have a major effect on you. So
you're exactly right, Bill. We've talked about that with. I think they've asked me that question. I don't know if Chris, we've talked to you about it, and some of our other guests that we have on the episodes about what was it? Was there a single moment? Was there an experience that led you down a certain career path? I know I have that. I know we all do in some way or another, and so it's pretty cool that one of the questions that a lot of our guests get is, do you remember the first duck you killed? And now you're talking about you remember the very first fish you caught and the significant influence it had on your life. That's pretty cool there. And thank you for sharing that story. We do have a number of questions that we want to get to with some kind of limited time here. Chris, we'll skip over we were going to ask you about kind of the early days of starting a fishing show, things of that nature.
I can talk fast.
Okay. And so I guess just from that standpoint, whenever you first started that show, what was going through your mind? How much uncertainty did you have at that time about the success you would likely have? You were already a really accomplished angler, professional fisherman at that time, right?
Well, I was working for a tackle company in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I'd been working for a company in Texas, and I had the idea if I could do it for Nick, the guy that invented the plastic worm, Nick Cream. And Nick was a great guy. And I went to Nick and I said, "Nick, I think I can do this on my own." And he said, "I figured that day would come. But you see that door right there? He said it swings both ways. If it doesn't work out, Bill, come back. And my dream was to always go to work for a lure company, and I had that opportunity. After winning several national bass tournaments, I was offered a job with 3 lure companies. One was Hidden, one was Bagley Bait Company in Texas, or in Florida, and one was Nick Cream Lure Company in Texas. And fishing plastic worms so much, we accepted the job. Diane and I accepted the job in Texas. But after a couple of years working with Nick, taking riders fishing, taking buyers fishing, and entertaining them and showing them how to fish plastic worms, I got to thinking, well, I can do this myself. Well, I tried it, and it was just tough. And I was still trying to fish tournaments, and finally I went to work for a lure company, Cordell Lure Company in Hot Springs. And Cotton was a great, great guy. He made a lot of great fishing lures back in those days. And he came to me and he said, we need to do a fishing show. I said, well, who are we going to get to do it? He said, you. And I said, Cotton, me doing a fishing show is like, television is like pouring perfume on a pig. I said, I can't even spell television. He said, well, you better learn how, because I think you can do it. Well, I'd been working with a fellow named Jerry McInnes, and Jerry started in southern Indiana, up your way, Chris, called the Fishing Hole. And I was working a lot with Jerry. Jerry went on to ESPN, eventually bought BASS, Bass. And Jerry, I probably wouldn't be doing TV to the degree I'm doing had it not been for Jerry. But we started, he taught me a lot about it. And I did it, started. And I started in the Memphis market. And I went to our CBS affiliate and the program and said, it'll never go in Memphis. And then I went to our NBC affiliate and they said, it'll never go. And I was pretty discouraged. And Diane said, why don't you try the ABC affiliate? They're sports-minded. So I went to our ABC affiliate, WHBQ, and programming like fishing. The director said, I used to do a local show at WBBJ in Jackson. Let's try it. So we did. And I had learned about shooting a little bit with a camera, a Canon Scoopik. It was very easy to use. And I learned a little bit about editing, 16 millimeter film. And I was scripting my shows, and it was all no sound. And we set up locally with HBQ. We started a local show. We got a local sponsor, and we were off and running. And then a station in Jackson, their sister station, said, would you do one for us? And I said, sure. And then another station in Jackson, or Baton Rouge, WBBJ Channel 2, another ABC affiliate said, do one for us? And I said, sure. And then a station in Paducah, Kentucky said, how about doing one for us? And I said, okay. Well, I didn't realize what I was biting. I was still fishing bass tournaments, still had a family. I was running up and down north and south, passing myself, fishing tournaments, still doing PR work for Cotton, for Cordell, doing 4 markets, 52 weeks a year, 208 shows a year, shooting,
That's
editing,
busy.
scripting. And I thought, good gracious. Well, fast forward, I finally gave my show to a good buddy of mine in Baton Rouge, Bobby Metters. And Bobby took it over. I had him as a guest for about several weeks in a row, and he knew how to do it. He took it over. Boy named Neely down in Jackson took over my show. I gave him my show there, dropped the show in Paducah, continued Memphis for a short period of time. Then we syndicated with a syndicator out of St. Louis. We 50 network markets. Then we went to 90 network markets. Cable was coming on, so we moved to ESPN. We blanketed the country from Spokane to San Diego to Dallas to Miami to Raleigh to New York to Detroit to Mid-America, St. Louis to Omaha to Memphis to Atlanta to Dallas. We were everywhere with ESPN.
Yeah.
But ESPN back then, it was a great network, but demographically, we just weren't there. And we rocked along with ESPN for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and then we moved. A network popped up in Nashville, Tennessee called TNN, the Nashville Network. We looked at that, and it was a perfect niche. We moved to TNN, and when we moved there, boom, the demographics were perfect. They had bull riding, NASCAR. So we moved in there, and we picked up Walmart. We picked up Chevrolet. We picked up Purina, and we hit a home run in a B market. Demographics were perfect. And we were off and running like gangbusters. We were really flying. And our sponsors loved it because of the Walmart. And so we rocked along there for 15 years. And then Viacom bought out
TNN.
Yeah, TNN and the Gaylord Enterprise deal. And so then we went with Discovery, NBC Sports, Sportsman Channel, and the Outdoor Channel. And we stayed there for several years. And now, demographically, where we're running World Fishing Network, Sportsman Channel, and the Outdoor Channel. And that's where we are now. And we run 52 weeks a year.
Still actively recording new shows.
We'll air over 1,000 times this year.
Wow.
Yeah. And you're still traveling like you're doing, like you mentioned, you had a saltwater show.
Yeah, we do 39 original shows a year, 26 freshwater and 13 salt. And most of our saltwater shows are inshore. Mm-hmm. Now, we'll go off a little bit, offshore, blue water, but we try to do shows that people can relate to.
Yeah.
Now, we started with a hunting show. We had a 13-week deal, and we did 8 shows way back yonder. Mm-hmm. And we had squirrel, rabbit, quail, duck.
Wow.
We didn't do deer or turkey because there was so much of that. But we had 8 shows shot, and we had Chevrolet and Purina. And I believe Campbell Lewall was the agency back then. And they said, hey, we're going to sponsor it, but we do not want to show any kill shots. And I said, what? And that's like saying, hey, see this big bass I just caught? Well, we can't show you us catching it, but we caught it. So it killed our hunting show. That's 20-something years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So we dropped the hunting show.
Yeah.
And we dropped it. We couldn't help but drop it because we didn't have any sponsorship.
Now, here's a question, and this is not on your list, Mike, so don't get too worried. I'm not going too far off.
It's all good.
And this is, more personal. Growing up, watching those TNN shows, and when you guys were just really taking off, and this would have been probably late 80s, early 90s, even into the mid 90s. There was a lot of other fishing shows out there.
Right.
And so like we would, my buddies, and we'd all go fishing, and one of my buddies, I'm more of a Hank Parker kind of guy.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like I'm more Orlando Wilson. I like, so
Roland Martin.
Roland Martin.
Oh yeah, they're all great
absolutely.
guys. Yeah.
And that was my question, was at that time when you guys were all really kind of coming onto the scene and really exploding in popularity, how was that relationship with them? Like, was it competitive?
Oh, they're great guys. They're even today. In fact, I talked to Hank. I think it was the day before yesterday. We're all real good friends. We in fact, many of us have the same sponsors. We do stuff together. We fish together. We do shows together.
Yeah.
If I have a sponsor and they're looking for something, I'll throw it off to Jimmy or to Roland or to Hank. We try to help each other. We're not competitors. We're just in the same kind of business. And we're all real good friends. And
cool.
In fact, Roland and Jimmy and I just finished working, and Hank, we just finished working a big promotion together 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. That's kind of where I thought about it, because I know you guys were all there together.
We're all real good friends.
Yeah, that's cool.
And we communicate together. And Jimmy's wife was real sick here, and we all just continued to call. And he said, Bill, thank you so much for calling. I just talked to Hank yesterday, and Roland calls, and we all just share. We try to help each other, and we're all good buddies.
That's pretty awesome. I saw you all interacting there at the fishing fair, Bass Pro World's Fishing Fair, and I thought that was the other coolest thing. Not just to get to see those people from my childhood and from that it was such an influence, but to see the way you were all interacting and getting along, and
we're all good friends,
having fun. That was pretty cool. A question, sort of a little bit of a turn here, and it relates to something that you're very well known for. Whenever you're catching a fish, or even after you've caught a fish, and I'm just kind of curious where this came from. Your signature habit, you might say, of talking to the fish, either as you're kind of fighting them to get them in the boat, or then once you've got them. One of the, as Chris mentioned earlier, one of our coworkers here noted that they still kiss their fish, in emulating one of your habits. Was that something that just came natural to you, or was that something you added to kind of bring a little additional excitement to the show?
Well, you know, we used to do a lot of shows with entertainers and celebrities, and the strength of Bill Dance Outdoors, I'll tell you a story there. Our show used to be Outdoors with Bill Dance. And you remember the old TV Guide magazine that used to come out? Well, I picked it up one day, and I looked at the time slot, and it said Outdoors. And I said, wait a minute. Our show's not on today. And so the next, somebody said, well, it was on. And I said, no, it wasn't. Some Outdoors was on. And so I called our producer, and I said, Frank, the show didn't air this week. And he said, yeah, it did. I said, at 2:30, it said Outdoors. And he said, well, that was us. And I said, well, I had several people tell me they looked for the time and it said Outdoors. It wasn't.
They were looking for Bill Dance.
I said, look. He said, let me check into it. So he called out the TV Guide, and they said, well, we don't have room to put Outdoors with Bill Dance. I said, well, we're going to change the name. And he said, what do you mean? I said, change it to Bill Dance Outdoors. So they flip-flopped it, and now it said Bill Dance. And so we changed our name from Outdoors with Bill Dance to Bill Dance Outdoors. But anyway, to getting people, guests, to line up, on Bill Dance Outdoors, we'd have entertainers. And whether it be football players, baseball players, country western entertainers, that there's tons of them that love to fish. Well, the strength of our show has been in our educational format. But when you can entertain and educate at the same time, you've got the best part of both worlds. And the education is the key. People want to be educated. Why are you fishing 20 feet of water on this particular lake with this particular bait at this particular time of the year? Now, it will apply in your lake at this time of the year at this water temperature. You can do this. This is something you can do. Not in the spring, not in the summer, but this time next year in the winter. You can do this on your lake. So the educational end of it. So I got to thinking, I said, I can't get all this education in when I have guests. If I'm by myself, I can get more education in. So I script every show.
Wow.
And I'll have a script. And I put everything I want to in that education, in that script. And when I shoot a piece, I time code it. I ask the cameraman time code, and I'll write that time code down, and I'll put it on that script. Other cameraman, he'll write it on his time code. So I know I've got that. Now, when I have a guest, when I had guests a lot, whether it be a Terry Bradshaw, or it'd be a Mel Tillis, or it'd be a Loretta Lynn, or whoever it would be in that field, I can't be educational. It can be entertaining, but it can't be educational. So I got to looking at rating numbers. What do people want? Do they want to see Terry Bradshaw acting silly or talking about Terry, and Terry was a great guest. I did 6 or 7 shows with Terry, or Mel Tillis, or Roy Clark, whoever the entertainer was. Or do they want the education? They want the education. So, me being by myself, there's nobody there to talk to except that camera. and I catch a fish, I may talk to the fish. I said, well, how you doing today? Turn your face around. Let me get the hook out. Oh, you look fat. You've been healthy. You've been eating shad. And I'm talking to it. You need to brush your teeth, whatever. And I talk to the fish a little bit because there's nobody else to talk to except. And then I said, but you notice one thing about this particular fish. You see the black blotch on him? That's the result. That's in pigmentation, and I'll talk about that, how that's formed, or I'll talk something about educational fact about that fish. But it's all about education. Now we're presenting something to DU today, and I wrote tidbits, quack bits, about educational stuff about ducks. I don't know a whole lot about ducks, but they're educational things about ducks.
Yeah,
like
that's awesome.
Why are ducks banded? Where are ducks banded? Mm-hmm. How long does it take a duck to fly from Canada to Mexico? And how they get there? What's the most popular duck? How long do ducks live? How fast can a duck fly? These are interesting tidbits.
I think Dr. Mike Brazier can answer all those questions right now.
And I wrote about 30 of them.
Yeah.
For our social media about ducks. And that I was going to, Nick's been we've been talking about doing. But there's just a bunch of tidbit stuff. But it's educational stuff. And I think that people like that.
Absolutely.
What's the most popular duck in North America?
Mallard.
Right.
It's not the wood duck? Oh, we have a debate already.
We have a debate.
No. I'm asking you. Would you mind telling me? No, but it's education, and I think that's what people like to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
what's the most popular worm hook?
Mm-hmm.
What's the most popular line? Is it monofilament? Is it braid? Is it fluorocarbon?
Yeah.
And why? You don't just say what it is, but why is it?
Yeah.
And that's been the strength of Bill Dance Outdoors, is in our educational format. Mm-hmm. And I have people every day, well, that's not true, all the time, quite often, a lot, I should say, said, Bill, I like it because you tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it, why you're taking a medium action rod versus a light action rod for this particular thing, why you're doing this, why you're doing that. It helps.
No, I mean that and that's we do that with the podcast with we do species profiles where we talk about, and I mean we really dive into like the mallard or the gadwall,
sure, that's great.
And people eat those up, and it's the same thing. It's educational, and that really kind of leads me to our next question. And this is a big topic for Ducks Unlimited, obviously, and really the entire outdoor industry.
Well, do you know what I brought up? Bass and ducks go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely.
They go together. The aquatic vegetation and how bass relate to the same types.
You're looking ahead at some of our future questions.
Yeah,
here.
He's getting all of our questions.
Oh, really?
Habitat types, how they blend together.
Yeah.
But one thing. I mean, like you said, this whole educational process, which we are very much all ingrained in. But influencing the youth in the outdoors.
Sure.
You have played a massive role in that, obviously. One of the questions we had here was, we're kind of pointing out the fact that you were an influencer before the term influencer ever came up. Now you have Instagram influencers and whatever, but you were the original influencer. And when did you recognize that you had, that capability to reach not only fishermen, like you say, from an educational perspective, but also the youth? And to get them motivated in the outdoors. And really, how important was that as Bill Dance Outdoors went on?
Well, we're not trying to impress anybody how many fish we catch 30 minutes of television, because you only see just a small percentage of those. We pick our best shots, or we pick the shots relating to what we're talking about, but more so from the educational standpoint. that we've been doing that since we started 56 years ago.
Wow.
When we first started doing outdoor programming, and we tried to do art, and then we tried to do our graphics and stuff. And the advantage that we have, we can take video and we can show. I've got an advantage that I can, what I'm talking about, I can show it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can, no, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Action is worth 1,000 words. When I can say how to set the hook, I can say, you maintain about 6 to 7 pounds of hook setting pressure. And here's how you set the hook. Well, you set it with, I'm sitting here telling you, but if I can show you, I get the point across 10 times better. Mm-hmm. You know, but where you maintain your maximum pounds of hook setting pressure. If you'll see, you know, watch this, and then I actually show it, and then I show it in slow motion. But I can show it better than I can tell it, and that's the advantage of. I can show it on social media with a clip, or I can show it on TV with a clip. So that's been a tremendous tool for us, But go ahead, you were going to say something about ducks and bass.
Well, we're going to get to that a little bit later on.
I'm sorry.
That's one of our next questions here. But first, I wanted to move to your relationship with Johnny Morris, Bass Pro Shops. We were talking about recruiting and influencing the next generation of hunters and anglers and outdoors men and women. Johnny Morris is a huge figure in that regard. Sure. I know you and Johnny have a very long and very deep friendship. And so just wanted you to talk about that. What has Johnny meant to you, and how do you view Johnny and Bass Pro's influence on our outdoor community in terms of recruiting, enabling recruitment of our next generation?
Well, Johnny Morris and our relationship started on Table Rock Lake in 1972. So our relationship goes back that far. Johnny is one, you know, somebody once said, if you can hold up 3 fingers when your time comes that you've got 3 close friends, well, Johnny Morris is one of those top 3. Johnny has been a close friend for a long time. Not only in, some say you can't mix business with pleasure. I don't know who said it, but that's a bunch of hooey. He has been not only a dear friend, a very close friend, but he's been a major sponsor. And his family, my family, have been very good friends and very close friends for a long period of time. Johnny Morris is the, I guess the best way I can describe him is the Roosevelt of our times. He is. He has done more for conservation today than any living soul on this earth. He gives more than he receives. I know this for a fact. He gives every function, he gives a percentage back to conservation. And what he's done for Ducks Unlimited, I look at the 4,500 square feet in the second largest Bass Pro in the country in Memphis, Tennessee. There's 4,500 square feet devoted for Ducks Unlimited. And the promotion that he gives DU and the money that he gives to DU and what he does for conservation and the support he gives to DU and the Elk Foundation and the Missouri Conservation and what he gave to the state of Tennessee for what we're doing and what he gives. He's just a giving soul, but he's the same Johnny Morris that I met 52 years ago. I just did a show titled 52 Years of Memories with Johnny, of our relationship that dates back 52 years ago. And the show title is 52 Years of Memories and of our relationship, of shows we've done together from Canada to Mexico to wading the Trinity River, catching gigantic gar, to our trips of goodness, to Stewart Inlet, of catching the big Goliath grouper that are in the pyramid, that are in the Wonders in Springfield, to the big alligator gar that are in the pyramid and also at Springfield. And he's constantly talking about our youth, getting our youth involved. He loves to see people catch fish. He wants to see people, when he writes his signature, go fishing. He means that. Johnny Marsh is a tremendous individual, but he's the same Johnny Marsh today as he was when I first met him. I remember we used to stay at the Floridian in Florida. It was a big sports club, and it was owned by Shenley's. His daddy was in the Brown Derby liquor business, and he had a chain of liquor stores in Springfield. And Shenley owned this big lodge. And when we'd fish bass tournaments on the St. Johns River in Willaca, Florida, several of us would stay there at that lodge. And Johnny would talk about getting in the mail order business. He'd dream about that. And he'd talk about it. And we'd be there talking, and he says, that would be a good thing. I'd like to do that someday. And it's amazing how that turned. His dreams always become reality. And he said, one day I got a phone call. He said, guess what? Daddy gave me half of the store. I said, what do you mean Daddy gave me half a store? He said, Daddy gave me half of a liquor store. And I said, what does that mean,
an interesting
John?
thing.
And he says, liquor? What are you doing in liquor? He says, no, wait a minute. That didn't sound right. Daddy gave me half of the back of a liquor store, and I'm opening up of fishing. And if you look in the 23 Bass Pro catalog, this new issue, you'll see a shot of it in the back of it. He says, I'm back there with a bunch of liquor bottles, but I'm selling sporting goods. I'm selling fishing tackle. But anyway, he said, will you come up for my grand opening? And I said, yeah. He said, I'll let you know. I'll be there. Well, a couple of weeks passed, and he called me, and he says, I'm having my grand opening this coming Saturday. Johnny's last minute on everything. I said, I'll be there. So I flew to Springfield. He picked me up. I spent the night with him. We got up the next morning. We went trout fishing. And we went to the store. And there were, goodness gracious, there were traffic and police cars directing traffic. You would think that we were at the Super Bowl. And we went into the store. As we walked in the store, I turned around and I looked up at the marquee, and it said, Jack Daniels, 5th, 1995. Jim Beam, 5th, 1795. Welcome, Bill Dance. I thought, man, I've had the big time. I'm up there with Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, it was a phenomenal promotion. And that was the kickstart. And from then on, it just got bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And then when we got the pyramid,
I was going to say, kind of, can you elaborate on? Can you actually just tell that story of how
it was
the pyramid
it was a nightmare. There were so many downfalls and downfalls and downfalls. We were on a plane going to Sevierville, and he said, "We got a proposition. Should we put a Bass Pro in the pyramid?" And I said, don't ask me. And he said, well, you need to make a decision on it. Jim Hagel was the president, and he said, yeah, make the decision. I said, I'm not going to make a decision. You're looking at a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 investment. I'm not going. He said, well, you need to make the decision. And I said, well, we left there and we went to Sevierville, and then we went down to Leeds, Alabama, and broke ground for a store there, and then down to Destin, broke store, and then we came back over to Jackson for a store opening. And then flying back into Memphis, he said, have you made a decision on the pyramid? And I said, I'm not making a decision on the pyramid. And anyway, he was going to spend 2 days here with me, and we were going to catfish on the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. And he said, I tell you what we're going to do. If we catch a catfish over 30 pounds, we're going to put a Bass Pro at the pyramid. And I said, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard you say. You're going to let a catfish decide if we're going to put a pyramid, if we're going to put a Bass Pro at the pyramid? He said, yeah. I said, that's the dumbest thing. So anyway, we got jumped off the plane at Olive Branch, and we came to my office, and it was cold. Golly, it was cold. We fished the river that afternoon. Got up the next morning, went up to Duval, put in the river, 28 degrees. Went up the river. Jack, one of his closest buddies that I've known, I knew Jack before he went to work for Johnny. We put in the river, loaded in. And I said, Johnny, don't set the hook. We were still fishing. I said, let the fish pull the rod down. Sure enough, he had a hit. He grabbed the rod and set the hook. I said, told you, missed the fish. And Jack's rod was sitting over there. And the rod hit. And I said, Jack said, I know what to do. I'm not going to do anything, Bill. Let him pull it down using circle hooks. It was right at freezing. Guide froze on. The rod went down, and Jack picked it up and just pulled back. The fish sets themselves with a circle hook. And Jack set the hook. He said, I got him. I said, see how you do it, Johnny? And so he reeled him up. We netted him. The fish weighed 34 pounds. Johnny says, where's the phone? Where's the phone? Get the mayor on the phone. Get Harrington on the phone. Get Mayor Harrington on the phone. And we got Mayor Harrington on the phone. And he says, we're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Right there in the boat.
Right there in the boat. And I said, that's the dumbest thing. And so we got the fish. And I said, kiss him. And he said, I ain't going to kiss that nasty thing. I said, don't say he's nasty. Yeah. You're going to put a pyramid in.
That's right.
So we turned him loose, weighed him, turned him loose. And we rushed back to the pyramid. And Johnny and I walked in. It was a dirt floor. And he said, look, we'll put a freestanding elevator here. We can put big giant cypress trees here. He said, Bill, we can put a river through here and put native fish to this area. I'm getting excited. And we'll put an aquarium up on the top of the pyramid. And I knew it was a done deal.
Yeah.
And so if you'll walk in the pyramid today, as soon as you walk in, look up on the wall on the left, there's a big sign that says, we're going to do it. And there's a picture of Johnny and Jack and I holding up that big catfish.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's the fish that did it.
I was not aware of that story. Chris told me about that earlier, and I was excited to hear the full story.
That's the story.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
no
that's
idea.
awesome.
We caught it. It was a 34-pound fish.
That's
I told him, anybody
That's an
catches that
important
fish,
catfish.
I said, if anybody catches that fish, you better turn it loose because
Yeah.
that's what brought the pyramid to Memphis.
Let's move on to the conversation about wetland conservation
Sure.
and where it intersects fisheries and anglers. And we started to touch on this a few minutes ago, but as you know, Ducks Unlimited has done wetland conservation for 85 years, our 85th anniversary. And for much of that time, it's all been sort of on the backs of waterfowl and our waterfowl supporters. And our mission is to conserve wetlands for waterfowl. But through the years, we've known about the benefits that it provides well beyond waterfowl. Increasingly in recent years, and certainly going forward, we're talking about those benefits, those broader benefits, more explicitly, and using that to help educate people about the many values of wetlands and attract additional people to our conservation mission. And I had an opportunity recently to pull together some examples of wetland conservation projects that DU has delivered that have a really strong connection to fisheries and anglers. That was a fun thing to do because I had no idea of the uniqueness of some of the projects that we're delivering in different parts of the country and how they are influencing habitat for fish and then habitat for anglers as well. And
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. What y'all are doing, but the ducks are helping you do it too. And let me tell you why. Bass fishermen owe DU a lot, and they owe the ducks that you're protecting a lot too. The duck itself is creating wetlands where there are no wetlands as a result of their droppings, for a better way of saying it. They're going into areas and creating new wetlands, if you don't understand what I'm saying.
Dispersing the seeds.
They're
of
dispersing
all
the seeds
wetland
and
plants.
creating new wetlands. They feed on hydrilla. They feed on milfoil. They feed on serratophyllum or coontail.
Coontail,
yeah.
And they
Look
feed
at Bill
on.
throwing
I
out the
know,
scientific
I love
names.
that.
I like that.
They do. They feed on this, and they deposit it. Now people say, well, I've said this so many times. Of all the different types of habitat that bass use, there's nothing better than vegetation. What does vegetation do? Vegetation purifies the water. Vegetation gives everything in the water column a place to hide. It gives all our type of forage a place to hide, new growth. It gives all our invertebrates and invertebrates places to hide. It gives our newborns places to hide. It produces oxygen. It has so many effects. One detrimental effect, it can get out of hand, but we have ways now of controlling it. Mm-hmm. But ducks help put vegetation in areas. I know of some areas in Florida that were voided of cover. But now, ducks, as a result of ducks, they have helped plant vegetation there. And that fishery, it's a good fishery now. It's a good fishery now. They say, does it rain fish? There's some truth to that. Do waterfowl carry eggs? Yes, they do. Have you ever seen a fish? Have you ever seen fish will fan an area till they can get to a hard pan? Mm-hmm. They'll fan till they can get to a marl, sand, or rock. That's where you see these white areas. They don't lay their eggs on silt or mud. They'll fan till they can get to a hard surface area. And once they get to that hard surface area, they'll lay their eggs. But if you ever pick up fish eggs, they're gooey. They're gluey. They have a gluey substance to it. Well, if a bird steps on that, it sticks to their feet, even after they're fertilized. And if they fly off with that and land on another body of water, and those eggs float free, they hatch in another body of water. And I've talked to fishery people and biologists, one in particular, that knows a lot about fish behavior, has showed me how that works. And it does work. And so where a body of water, a shallow area, where a duck has gone in and created a wetland, and then a crane or another type of bird has gone back in and dropped eggs, it's created a fishery. And I know of 3 or 4 areas in Central Florida where this has happened, and there's a good fishery there, and it's a result of one thing: a duck. A duck started it.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting stories from across the country of those great examples. I worked in Louisiana for 13, 14 years, and we do a lot of work in the coastal marshes down there, and it's not very difficult at all to find certain projects that we do that are beneficial from a fishery standpoint. Now, there's the whole issue of ingress and egress into some of those areas, right, and we've gotten better at accommodating that, but marsh terracing is a technique that we used often in coastal Louisiana, and having been associated with a research project down there investigating that particular technique, it's pretty remarkable to see the vegetation response in and around those terraces, and then, of course, the fish response as well in those areas where we've seen that submerged aquatic vegetation. So that's one of the things that I think will be talking more about as an organization is these different benefits, and fisheries is certainly
and just clean water in general. I mean,
yep,
fish rely on clean water, ducks rely on clean water.
That's right.
There's a lot of work that DU does that benefits both, in a significant way. So, and there's lots of ways to cross that bridge for sure.
So ducks and bass, they kind of overlap. They work hand in hand.
They overlap. The other thing I will say is a big bass is not averse to eating a duckling.
Yeah. So sometimes
not much of
good.
anything is averse to eating a duckling when they're at their really small stage. I've seen that before too. Mm-hmm. Any other kind of fish as well. So let's see, Chris, where are we now on our questions? We're getting pretty close to wrapping up.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we talk on the DU podcast a lot about, and bringing Mike's science perspective to it, is the changes in technology. that DU uses for our conservation efforts, and even down to our fundraising efforts. I mean, the changes in technology. What have you seen as far as the transition and the changes in technology in fishing in general, and even what you do? But I mean, just that.
And you're talking about like in equipment and
yes.
When I started out, I told you about the metal rods.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Starting out in the 50 some odd years that I've watched this industry grow, and I've met a lot of the people in the industry, manufacturers. Growing up, I've been on every corner. It seems like I was a distributor salesman. Then I got in the manufacturing end of it. I owned half a Strike King lure company at one time. And I helped make baits. I helped design baits. And I still do that even today with some of my sponsors, and design and testing baits in the promotional end of baits, working with sponsors, working with in the design of baits, and now working with the promotional end of new design of equipment with my sponsors, whether it be hooks, whether it be line, whether it be rods, whether it be reels. We used to take equipment a year in advance and play with it and try to tear it up. I've seen the boats, I've seen the trolling motors, I've seen the hooks, I've seen the line, I've seen the rods, I've seen the reels, and I've seen how they progressed. If my granddaddy could see the rods that we use today, how much lighter they are, how much more sensitive they are, the different types of actions for different types of things, he'd faint. I look at our hooks; they're sharper. The diameter of the hook, we used to take a hook. The diameter of that hook was much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Today they're thinner. You can push a pin in a potato a lot easier than you can a nail. And so the thinner wire hooks, they penetrate much quicker. They're stronger. We look at line today. We look at, I can use a 30-pound braided line, which has a mono diameter of, say, 8-pound test.
Yeah.
So we look at our trolling motors. I'm running trolling motors today that are run on 24 or 36 volts. I'm running lithium batteries today, where an acid battery weighs 70 pounds, a lithium battery weighs 24 pounds. Wow. And the advantage is what it does. I can run 2 days on this battery, on this lithium battery. And probably used, other day I'm running 24 volts, and I'm running at a strong wind, a north wind 20 with gusts into 20, 25, 30. And I'm in a pretty good wind. And 8 hours of fishing with daylight savings time, I used only 20% of the battery power.
Wow.
Our batteries have improved. The biggest step probably is in our electronics is our graphs.
Mm-hmm.
What I've seen now is with Panoptics, with our live scopes, and what we can see. I watched the other day, we had a cold front come through, and I told my cameraman, I said, Jimmy, video this, watch this. And I throw a jig, and I'll sit in on this side of a ledge. And I said, watch this. And I increased the size. I was throwing a 16th, and I went up to an 8th. And I said, you see the jig? And he said, I got it. And it was on a 10-inch screen. And I said, watch that jig fall. And I said, you see it? And I said, now watch this. I started reeling it. And I said, you see that crappie? He said, I see it. And I could see the jig come like this, and the crappie, they were inactive. That crappie would come right in behind it. And just about the time he'd get to the ledge, the crappie would turn off of it. And it was just one right after another. And I'd reel it, the crappie would come right in behind it and turn right off of it. And when I said, here's a prime example, they won't hit it. I went to an 1/8 ounce because it was a little bit bigger. And I said, now I'm going to switch to a 1/16 just to see if they'd see it. But you could see it. They just turned right off of it. And to be able to see schools of fish and to be able to drop a bait. I did a piece for Garmin. I've got some video, underwater video. I said, you believe a bass can hit a bait, take it in his mouth, and eject it, and you never feel it? I said, well, they can actually do that. Watch this piece of video. And I've got a shot of a crankbait coming and about a 7-pound bass going, actually hitting it, coming up, taking it, and as he turns, the bait's completely gone. And then he just turns, he goes, wow. And he spits it completely out. The bait's got 2 sets of treble hooks in it.
Yeah.
And I said, he took the bait in, he ejected. And I put that together with Panoptics. And I said, watch this. And I made a cast, and you see the crankbait running, and you see the bass come up, and he hits the bait, and then he ejects the bait. You see the bass, and here comes the bait, and the bass turns again, chases the bait, and grabs it. Then it cuts to me above the surface, and I set the hook, and you see the bass fighting underwater, and then it cuts back to me, and you see the bass jump out of the water, and then I fight the fish up, lift him out of water, and take the fish out. And we presented that to Garmin, and it's running. They've got it on their they've got it on their website right now.
And that's the cool thing. That's why I asked the question. Just this transition,
it's
amazing.
Unbelievable how far that's advanced.
Yeah, and it's the same for I do all the product stuff for the magazine, and so I'm a gear junkie, and I think waterfowlers in general are gear junkies, but that's very similar to fishermen. Bass fishermen are gear junkies. My buddy's got a $15,000 bass boat with $17,000 worth of electronics on it right now. And he's at the Tennessee River every weekend. And it's like one of those deals where the gear is just it means so much to the sport.
It's just and I've got ICAST. I've got in fact Johnny's going with. We're doing in July. We've got a snook shoot in at Palm Bay in South, down toward Juniper, but in July. But I can't wait to see what's new.
Yeah.
At ICAST, every year there's something new, and but to see how far this industry is gone, and how far they've advanced, and I look at boats. It's amazing. The speed, the engines. Look at now, 4 strokes.
Oh yeah,
they're quieter, they're stronger, they're more fuel efficient than ever before. I was on Toledo Bend one day, umpteen years ago, and I walked in the marina in Forest Woods, who had Ranger Boat Company. I don't know if you've ever heard of Forest.
Oh yeah,
he was first with bass boats, and Forrest was sitting there, very recognizable in his big old cowboy hat. I've never seen anybody could run a bass boat 50 miles an hour down the lake and his cowboy hat wouldn't blow. But I walked over and I said, you need some company? He said, well, sure, sit down, Bill. And I was running Ranger boats at that time. And I said, I'm about ready to turn my TR-10 in. Let me ask you, can you do something? And he said, well, let's just hear what you got in mind. And I said, can you make me a 2-tone boat? He said, had his cheeseburger up about right there, and he says, I don't believe I know what a 2-tone boat is, Bill. I said, 2-color. Well, we ain't never done that before. What color is 2-tone? I said, well, whatever. I said, can you make it blue and white? Let me get back and talk to Randy. And let's say Randy was his son-in-law, became president of Ranger. He said, let me talk to Randy and see what we can come up with. Well, 2 weeks later, Dippy Coles was his Ranger dealer in Memphis at that time, over on Tillman. Phone rang and I answered it. Dippy said, Bill, I got the prettiest bass boat I've ever seen in my life. And I said, you could tell where he was from. He sure wasn't from Boston. And I said, you got to come see this boat. I've never seen a boat like it in my entire life. It is the prettiest boat I've ever seen. And I said, well, what's it look like? He said, it's blue and white. And I said, white? He said, yeah. And he said, what's even amazing, it's got your name on it. And I said, it does. Well, I'll be over there in just a minute. Well, come on quick. I said, do you think the colors will fade? And he says, no. I said, well, okay, I'll be there. So I got over there, and I walked up, and I said, good Lord, that's the prettiest boat I believe I've ever seen in my life. So awesome. I looked at it, and I said, I've never seen a boat that pretty in my life. And I called Forrest, and I said, Forrest, that's the prettiest boat I believe I've ever seen. He said, it's the first two-tone boat we ever made. How you like that word, Bill, two-tone? And I said, I like it. And he said, we never made a two-tone boat before. He said, we may have started something here. Yeah. And he said, I called Hubert Green in North Carolina, and I told him what we had. And he said, what's a two-tone boat? And I said, a two-tone boat is a boat with two colors. and Hubert says, can you make a red and white one? He said, I can make a green and white one, a red and white one, a blue and white one. A blue and white one's a Bill Dance boat. And he said, that started it right there. We started making them, and he said, it wasn't long we saw other boats.
Now, did that boat end up in your boat shop, in your shed?
Yeah,
eventually?
Yeah. I started running it right then. And I was at a show 2 or 3 years ago. Forrest passed away last year, but a guy walks up to me, and he at a tackle show, boat show, and he goes, you recognize that picture? And I said, no, I tell you, I recognize the guy. I recognize the boat. I recognize the creek. I recognize the lake. And I can almost tell you exactly the location. He says, really? And I said, yeah. I said, the boat is my first two-tone bass boat. The location is Barber Creek. The lake is Eufaula. And the location is almost where I caught my personal best stringer, 10 bass that weighed 55 pounds in a BASS tournament. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And it was an east-west ledge where I could anchor and parallel that 5-foot ledge where it dropped off to 25 feet. And he says, I don't know about that ledge, but you said everything else right. And I said, I don't know who it is running that boat. He said, it's me. And I said, oh, okay, now I know. I said, you see that fellow over yonder in the big cowboy hat? He said, yeah. I said, that's Forrest Woods. Walk over there and just hold that picture up in front of him. And I said, the first thing he was going to do, he's going to grin. He's going to take that cowboy hat off, and he's going to look right over here, and he's going to wave it. He walked over there, and he held it up, and Forrest went, waved his cowboy hat.
That's pretty awesome.
But that was kind of the change in colored boats back then.
Bill, we've talked about a number of things today, and I'm sure Chris and I could do this for the rest of the afternoon. But we'll start wrapping up here. I do have one question here, then I'll see if Chris has anything to close with. We've talked about a lot of the changes that you've seen that have enabled much greater access. They've equipped people with all sorts of different ways to fish and improve their fishing. But anytime we have these conversations, like when we talk about the good things with waterfowl and wetlands conservation that we've seen over the years, we always balance that against a recognition that all is not necessarily well. There are still challenges that we face in waterfowl habitat arena. We're seeing a decline in the number of hunters and the number of people engaged in hunting. And so I guess I wanted to get your thoughts. You've seen all these changes. You've been sort of a pivotal figure in the angling community. When you look forward, what are the things that concern you and that you and others are trying to have a positive impact on?
I see fishing growing. I see, because interstate travel the way it is today, what the state of Georgia is doing, what the state of Arkansas is doing, what Governor Lee is doing for our state, what our game and fish departments are doing. I see what Florida's doing. Fishing is a 12-month-a-year deal. With wearing apparel today, our rivers, the multitude of species. I look at my home state of Tennessee. We have 26 major lakes. We have one detrimental thing going on that we've got to curb. I don't know how we're going to do it. We're working hard, spending a lot of money on it. It's the Asian carp program.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. Yeah. I mean, it's so detrimental. It's just I don't even get into it. But it's our fisheries are really good. We're doing a lot of programs right now to help our fisheries. Duck hunting is very popular. I talked to a real good friend of mine down at Beaver Dam this morning, real early. He's avid duck hunter. You may know him, Mike Boyd, and Mike's a real close friend of mine. Mike said he would like to see the limit drop from 6 to 4 because he could get out of his blind a little bit quicker. But he just laughed when he said that. But he said he was very content with the regulations and the way things, the great job DU's doing. The wetland programs we're doing great. We've got tons of ducks. I listened to him.
I think some people would argue with the way tons of ducks based on what we've heard the past few years.
He's very content because he's had great seasons.
Yeah.
It's up and down.
Yeah.
It's just like fishing. You're going to have good years. You're going to have bad years. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days.
Yeah.
You're not going to please everybody.
You're right.
You're just not going to please everybody. You're going to please this percent. And not please this. Nobody's going to be 100% content. You could raise the limit to 10, and you're going to have a percent that's going to be 12. Against that, and you're going to have a percent that's going to be for it. I don't care what you're doing with the wetlands. You're going to have some for it. You're going to have people against it. You have to do what you think is right, and that's all you can do. You have your beliefs, and you're trying to do the right thing, and that's all you can do. I believe what I'm doing when I say, here's the best way I know how to do this. And I have to, that's just what works for me. This is what works for DU. And here's a program that's worked for years and years and years, since the Dust Bowl. And this program has worked for years and years and years. And here's living proof it's worked.
Yeah, here's the science.
Yeah.
So we have to go with what works for us. And if we only learn from our mistakes, and if it doesn't work, we'll change it. And we're sorry if you don't agree with us, but give us your ideas, and we'll work on them. You just can't please everybody, and it's just that's just the way it is.
You've been around long enough. You figure that out, and you come to accept it. You can't please everyone.
Absolutely. I love my wife to death. We've been married 50 some odd years, 58 years. And I can't please her all the time. I'm going to do the best I can. I can't please my children all the time, but I'm going to do the best I can. They're not going to please me all the time, but they do the best they can. It's just the way life is. We have to do the best we can and keep going. We learn as we go, and we stumble. That's just part of life. But y'all do a fantastic job. You really do. I used to do a lot of duck hunting, and but I don't do as much now because I'm I can't do everything. People say, "Do you hunt?" And I said, yeah, I hunt
You
fish.
run out of
So I
time,
spent
though.
most of my time hunting fish
Yeah.
and through the winter months. But I've got a lot of friends that hunt. Old John Godwin with Duck Dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
John's a real good friend of mine. And John and I do promotions together. I talk about fishing. He talks about duck hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a great time together. We fish together. I've done their show before, Duck Dynasty show before, and they're a bunch of the Robertsons, and it's just great guys, and they're all behind Ducks Unlimited. They know y'all do a great program.
Appreciate that.
You do, and you're not going to be successful 100% of the time. That's just the way the good Lord intended it to be. But you're more successful than you're not. So keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. I had one final question to close out. I don't know, Chris, do you have anything else?
No, I mean, I think, we wanted to touch briefly on the Bill Dance Signature Lakes that you're doing with the TWRA and kind of explain what that program is. And
Well, we're working with Tennessee Tourism, the state of Tennessee, and Tennessee Wildlife, Tennessee TWRA. Governor Lee gave us an opportunity. We took 20 lakes across the state, 10 access lakes like Reelfoot, Pickwick, Dale Hollow, Chickamauga. We got a list of them. And then we took 9 park lakes and then 1 WMA lake. I'll give you an example, a close lake, Herb Parson.
Yeah.
We're going to make Herb Parson in many of our park lakes family-friendly lakes. For instance, with Herb Parson, the governor gave us, I think, close to $2 million. And we're going to go in there, we're going to fix the ramps, we're going to add a couple of piers, we're going to go in and not do too much underwater. We're going to add feeders, we're going to improve the fishery. We're going to go in and make it a bluegill catfish. Bass fishing is pretty good over there right now. But to where people can come there and catch fish. And it'll be monitored to where your chances of catching a 16 to 20 ounce bluegill is very, very good in numbers of them. And we can manage that, and we know how to manage that. We'll have the resources to do it where we can, that's just one lake. Big Hill Pond up here on 57 going toward Pickwick will be another lake. Carroll County Lake will be another lake. Maple Creek will be another lake where we can go in and stock these lakes, balance the lake, keep forage in the lakes, and grow big fish where people can come to these lakes and catch fish. And we'll keep the lakes stocked. We'll keep the lakes well managed where the predator-prey relationship is well in balance. And won't let the lakes get out of hand and overstocked. And TWRA, we've already started working on them. And we've checked, but there'll be a list of them. They go online and you'll see the list of them. But
I believe it was mentioned in
there. The program's going to be ongoing.
Yeah.
And where our excess lakes, we're going in and make improvements on the boat ramps and access into the lakes, like, say, Dale Hollis, Chickamauga. But a lot of that, what we're doing is online, so you can check with Tennessee Tourism.
Bill Dance Signature Lakes. That's
right.
Okay.
Right.
People are interested.
So it's an ongoing
that.
thing, and it'll get better and better and better in time. We've got a lot to learn, but we've got a lot of talented people that are working on it. Tennessee Wildlife, Tennessee Tourism, and the state of Tennessee. But Governor Lee, who's an avid sportsman, is a big-time conservationist, he's behind the program big time, and he's helped us tremendously with it. So we're looking forward to making this a big, big success, and I know it's going to be.
Well,
So we've got a lot of talented people that know a lot about it and working on it.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing all that come to fruition as well. Herb Parsons is not too far from where my wife and I live, and we'll try to get over there.
Yeah.
Herb Parsons, surprisingly, is in a WMA lake, in a wildlife management lake, is unbelievable how many people fish that. Mm-hmm. But what this will do, it'll draw neighbors, it'll increase license sales, it'll increase non-resident and resident sales, but it'll draw people from our neighboring states to come here too.
That's just one example of the many things that you've done over your career for fishing and for anglers. And I don't know if you ever imagined that the Bill Dance brand would get as large as it is, but I do want to ask you, looking across all of those accomplishments and contributions that you've made, what are you most proud of? Across that entire suite of accomplishment, which one stands out in your mind if you can pick one or two?
You mean of accomplishments?
Yeah.
Well, I have. You have certain things that you've accomplished in life. I think being able to. There's several things. One thing is being able to turn a hobby into a profession. And then being able to share with others what I've learned about this great sport and teaching others what I've learned about this great sport. And to have people tell me what they've learned by listening to what I've learned and that they've gained something from that. But I had a writer tell me recently, he said, of all the things you've done, tell me one particular thing, just right off the cuff. Is it one big thing that stands out in your mind? Is it a particular tournament you won? Is it a particular award you won? What single thing stands out in your mind that in your fishing career? Well, the one thing that I look back, the one single thing that really, really means a lot to me, I watched each one of my 4 children catch their very first fish. And now I've watched 4, is that right now? Yeah. 4 of my 7 grandchildren catch their very first fish. Now, and to be able to pass it on. So when you can watch one of your own shoot the first buck, call in that first mallard, gobble up that first turkey, or catch that first fish, and you're there with them and experience the excitement and see that'll last, that lasting impression will stay with you the rest of your life. So I remember one of my granddaughters, we've got a lake right there at the house, and my daughter, when she got married, we gave her some property right across in the woods, right across the lake. And my granddaughter had just thrown out, and she hung this catfish, and she was screaming, "Help me, help me!" And Pamela, my daughter, was hollering, "Come on, supper." And I said, she's going to get cold. You better put it in the microwave or put it back in the oven, because she's got her hands full. And Pamela was screaming off the back porch, "Her supper's on the table." And I said, well, she's got her supper on the other end of the line. And this catfish was just screaming, drag. And Sophie was saying, "Help me, help me, help me." I said, "No, you made the cast. You set the hook." And one time, the rod went straight out, and I just took this one finger and reached around and pulled the rod back up. Oh, I said, "Keep your rod tip up." That's the only time I just touched the rod and pulled it back up to about 1 o'clock. And it was strip. And the channel cats are just notorious. They're just tremendous fighters. And it screamed and went this way. And she said, "You're not going to help me?" And I said, I'm going to cheer you on. I'm going to give you a lot of encouragement." And I said, "Don't horse him. Don't horse him." And she fought him this way, she fought him that way, she fought him this way. She said, "Are you going to help me?" I said, "I'm going to help you." I had some boga grips, and I said, I'll pick him up when you get him up to the bank." "I don't know if I'm going to get him to the bank. I don't know. He's the biggest catfish." And finally, she was about 4 years old, and she's 5, and she was screaming. Finally, she got it up to the bank, and I reached down to the boga grips and pulled it up. And it was about a 12, 13-pound channel cat, and she went crazy. And I said, "You see, you made the cast. You set the hook. You did the whole thing by yourself. And you can't say someone else Granddaddy helped you helped you catch it. You caught it all by yourself. And she, even to this day, she says, I caught a 13-pound catfish by myself. And I remember every bit of that. I remember her expression and her face and her excitement and her eyes and her screaming. And those are just special moments. And it's just like shooting a first buck or calling in that first mallard or gobbling up that first turkey. Those are things you just pass it on. You don't forget those things. Yeah. Those are special moments in life. So,
Bill, I don't think we need to say anything else. We'll leave it right there.
Yeah, that's great.
Except thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for everything that you've meant to us as kids growing up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for everything you've done. And
we're all still growing.
Yeah, that's right. And especially thanks for coming in today. I mean, this has been fantastic.
Thank y'all. I really appreciate it. It's been great. You do a great job here.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
A special thanks to our guest on today's episode, Mr. Bill Dance, America's most recognizable angler. I also thank my co-host, Chris Jennings, for being here with us today, our producer, Chris Isaac, for the great job that he does with the podcast, and then to you, the listener, we thank you for joining us and for your support of wetlands and waterfowl conservation.